Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg offered $800 million for DeepMind. They said, look, we'll sell to you, but you need to let us have an ethics board. And Mark Zuckerberg was like, no, don't want to do that. I don't think OpenAI would even exist if...
Parmy Olson knows more about the power struggles in technology than anyone else. She has written a book on the biggest AI rivalry which will shape all of our lives. This will be the Bill Gates versus Steve Jobs of the 21st century.
One of the things I think companies need to be wary of is their younger staff becoming dependent on the AI. I spoke to this one individual, he's like 23 years old. He was coming into work and he was talking to ChatGPT all day. That was his work. It was the youngest workers who were just using AI a bit too much. Middle managers had the best balance and the executives were barely using AI. Why would you hire a consultant or an expert when you can just ask Claude or Perplexity or ChatGPT?
What jobs do you think are most at risk in the next 5 years?
Oh, definitely.
Make sure you subscribe so we can continue to get bigger and bigger guests. And congratulations on winning the book.
Thank you.
FT Business Book of the Year. That's
really wild. I'm still not over it. Like, what?
Yeah. How did you find out?
There was like a whole award ceremony. I was there with my husband, my dad, my boss, my publisher. It's really glitzy, and there's like round tables with fancy food, and someone goes up on stage and they announce the winner.
That's cool. And that's the only award of the night, right?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
it's like literally 80% of it is just eating the dinner and making conversation with people. Wow. And then there's like a little introductory remarks from the FT editor.
Well, welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future. When did you know you'd been nominated for it?
Oh, well, first I heard that I'd been longlisted, and then I thought, wow, that's amazing. And then we found out there was a date by which we were gonna find out if I'd been shortlisted, and I thought, oh, I don't think I'm gonna get shortlisted. And then I was shortlisted, and I thought, oh my God, that's incredible! Wow, I get to go to this fancy dinner and dress up, and I can bring some guests and my family. And I definitely did not expect to win. No way. So I was really shocked to have won. It was incredible.
And when was the moment you thought, there's a book here and I'm going to write it? Because you do have quite a busy day job as well.
Yeah. So I had been writing about AI probably for about 7 years. Mm-hmm. First with Forbes, actually longer than 7 years. First with Forbes, then with the Wall Street Journal. And I continued writing about it with Bloomberg. And there have been a few times when editors have told me, this is kind of like, maybe you could broaden your beat a little bit. Yeah. But I really wanted to stick with it because I am fascinated by the people trying to build these things. And the reason I wanted to write the book was because when ChatGPT came out, I knew that behind the scenes was this goal to not just build a chatbot, but to build a god, to build AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, or this AI that surpasses human intelligence. And I'm just so fascinated by that goal because the people building AGI don't quite know exactly what they're building. They just know they want to build something really, really smart, really powerful, and so powerful and smart that it can solve all sorts of problems. And so it becomes this utopia. And I picked Sam Altman and Demis Hassabis as the two key characters, if you will, for the book, because they were the first two to actually put their necks on the line and publicly say, we're starting a company to build AGI. And Demis was the very first, the British guy in 2010. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that because he's a neuroscientist by background. He's a computer scientist as well. And he, when he started that company, the idea of AGI was like a fringe theory. He would have been laughed out of the room with other scientists for talking about it. But I personally wanted to write about this journey to this altruistic goal that these two guys were on. Because along the way, for me, this was just like a story of compromises and irony that they had set out to make the world a better place by building AGI. and they wanted to benefit humanity in all sorts of ways. But in the end, or at least so far, they were just actually benefiting these big tech companies who they aligned themselves with in order to reach that bigger goal.
Can you explain a bit about Demis Hassabis and the background? Because it was interesting. We did a sort of straw poll of people that kind of work here, not at Jimmy's Jobs, but kind of in the co-working space that we're in and so on. And basically everyone knew who Sam Altman was.
Yeah.
But not as many people knew who Demis was.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was fascinating. Bear in mind, you know, he's sort of 6 miles up the road.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't quite get the credit that he sort of deserves, as you say there. But can you tell us a bit about the background of him?
Yeah, he many people consider him to be a genius. He was a prodigy, a chess player from a very young age, and he was a chess champion at the age of 13. And he was designing computer games at the age of 13. I don't know if you ever played Theme Park. That he co-wrote that game. And he built that game.
I probably learned more about business from Theme Park than I did when I was at school, to be honest.
It's quite a clever game because, you know, you do learn about things like profit margins and revenue and things like that. So it's quite clever. And perhaps that was useful for him as an entrepreneur in the future. He started a game designs company because he was obsessed with games. He was one of these people that just like, you know, he has an obsession. He just sticks with it for years and years. But he's also this really balanced person because people who meet him, almost everyone I've interviewed who worked with him really likes him and really respects him. And he started this video game company called Elixir. They had huge ambitions to build video games with AI baked in. But then when they released a game, it flopped because they'd focused too much on the technology and not enough on the gameplay, and the game was boring.
Yeah.
And that was just like really, really hard for Demis and his co-founders and everyone else. And so he went to UCL and did his PhD in neuroscience and kind of rekindled his passion for AI. And while he was there, he met his co-founders, Mustafa Suleyman and Shane Legg of DeepMind, and they started this company together. In the book I talk about how they first started kind of discussing what they were going to do, and there's like this electricity between the three of them. You know, for a startup to really work, sometimes it really is about the chemistry between the co-founders, and all three of them were very different and played very different roles in the company. But Demis absolutely was the head of that company, and it was very much kind of built in his image in a lot of ways. So he was really the first person to start a company that would seek to build AGI. It was a very secretive company. It was like a research lab, and we can talk more about what happened, how they sold to Google and everything else. But it would go on to become one of Britain's most successful tech companies.
But let's talk a bit about the kind of, obviously not exit to Google, but the sort of how they fold in with Google, because it basically comes down partly to access to computing power, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And talent and money. Because, from what I've heard talking to people who worked with Demis, he really cared a lot about having talented individuals. And even when he was at Google, when he had sold to Google, it was very important to retain control about who was hired. And it so happened he was just really, really good at hiring the best people. And he knew before most of the big tech companies, even in Silicon Valley, that deep learning, this particular approach to machine learning, was the best approach to building powerful AI. And by around 2012, when people in Silicon Valley were starting to realize this, 2 years into him building his company, he had the world's top deep learning scientists all working at DeepMind. And those guys started getting phone calls from people like Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, trying to poach them and offering them, 3 or 4 times their salary or more. And Demis recognized that he was going to really struggle to keep that talent, to keep those people without raising significantly more money, not just from investors, but potentially through a sale. And he'd had offers. He'd had Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg had held conversations with him and offered $800 million for DeepMind. But Demis also and his co-founders really cared about building AI responsibly and safely and having oversight. They knew that they didn't feel quite right with a single profit-driven company controlling this technology, this godlike AI they were trying to build. And when Facebook came along, they said, look, we'll sell to you, but you need to let us have an ethics board that will have legal control over this AI when we eventually build, when it gets really, really powerful. And Mark Zuckerberg was like, no, don't want to do that. Why would I spend $800 million on a company if I'm not going to have full control of the technology? That's why I named the book Supremacy, because this is really about control. Who's in control? But guess who said yes? Google. They said, yes, you can have that ethics board. We'll sign the paper.
Don't do evil, as the famous
Well,
Google
yeah,
film.
exactly. But funnily enough, it never actually happened.
Yeah, exactly, right.
So don't believe what they tell you either.
And talk to us a bit more. You mentioned the title of the book there, but the cover of it is very striking.
Oh yeah,
It's
you
sort
like
of
the cover,
I
huh?
really do. I know I mentioned this in the emails to you as well, but like I don't know the sort of really strong lime green, but where's the image of the front of it from?
It's a painting of Napoleon.
Yeah.
And I think so the book designers at Macmillan were really good. When we were first talking about the book cover, I think they sent me something like 12 different possible designs. They were all really different. And I really liked this one particular one because this is a story about people. And this idea of having an image of this kind of a guy with a scepter or in regal robes. And I think in some of the mock-ups, it was like the full, emperor style robes and thrones and stuff. And I thought that's really kind of what this is about. This is about ego, and it's about hubris, and it's about wanting to control and oversee this incredible new invention, this technology, and to steer where it goes, for better or worse.
And you didn't decide to write about Zuckerberg versus Musk, right? Because about a year ago, that was a lot of the kind of like focus, right? They got this MA fight and so on. And all this kind of like...
course. I wish it had happened secretly. I mean...
Are you a fan of Jimmy's Jobs of the Future? Hi, I'm Sonny, one of the producers behind the show. Have you ever thought, my business deserves to be in the spotlight too? Well, you're not alone. Companies reach out to us all the time, asking us to create podcasts and digital video content for them. But until now, we've only taken on a limited amount of projects. But here's the good news. In 2025, we're expanding. Our production company, Boxlight, is now ready to help more businesses like yours tell their stories with high-quality, white-label content. Curious to see what we can do or how much it might cost? Head over to boxlight.io. You'll find examples of our work and even a podcast calculator to explore your options. That's boxlight.io. We'd love to help you shine in 2025. Now, back to Jimmy.
And you didn't decide to write about Zuckerberg versus Musk, right? Because about a year ago, that was a lot of the kind of like focus, right? They got this MA fight and so on. And all this kind of like...
course. I wish it had happened secretly. I mean, again, for me, what makes Demis and Sam stand out is that they were the two builders, the two people trying to build AGI.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg has talked about building general intelligence, but only because he copies what everybody else does all the time, and he's just kind of jumping on the bandwagon yet again.
Yeah.
There have been plenty of books written about Musk, and I think Musk has played an important role in AI, but I think Sam and Demis really are the two most important visionaries in this field. And I think you're right. It is crazy that Demis is just a few miles up the road, but he's very much under the radar. And he arguably kicked off this whole race, to build AGI. I don't think OpenAI would even exist if Demis hadn't started DeepMind.
Yeah, exactly. And it's strange, isn't it? I just had a moment of thinking back to when Dominic Cummings went into number 10 in 2019, wearing an OpenAI t-shirt, right?
Oh, I missed that. He was wearing an OpenAI t-shirt?
Yeah.
It just said, what, like the logo or something?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay.
But it's just like interesting how, again, company just the road, not kind of, not
What
in
is
there.
that guy up to these days, I wonder?
Well, I'm sure we haven't heard the last of him. That's what we're going to do. Well, so you studied these two more than most, like, what is it that drives people at that level, right? Because money's certainly not really a factor in it. You know, does it come down to science? Does it come down to power? What keeps them going? Because it strikes me, it is almost a bit of a kind of like Federer, Nadal, Ronaldo, Messi kind of matchup, right? But they're driving each other on, arguably.
I think maybe this is me just being a little bit naive, but just from what I've seen over the years of watching technologists and entrepreneurs and tech billionaires, there seems to be the motivations change as they get older. And I think in the case of Sam and Demis, when they started out on their journeys, they were very, very mission-oriented. And I think the goal for both of them genuinely was to do something great for the world, like to really just have an impact. And you could say that's maybe ego-driven, or they are trying to leave a legacy, and there's some kind of, it's not entirely selfless, but it's very common, particularly in the world of technology, because tech can be so transformational, not just as a business widget, but to how we live our lives. Think about how the smartphone and apps and social media have just changed culture. So there's so much opportunity in tech to just have a huge impact. And I think Sam and Demis kind of took that to the next level, almost in this kind of messianic way, because Demis would talk about, I mean, the absolutely wild things that AGI was going to do. That he would say it was going to cure cancer. Multiple times he said that. And
He
even
tweeted it last week or something, right?
Yeah, I think it was in his 60 Minutes interview. He said it was going to cure all sorts of different diseases. And it would also solve climate change, because it would help us discover new energy sources. It would also help us understand the nature of reality. Perhaps even discover our divine origins, and help us with scientific discovery. And Sam, perhaps because he's got more of an entrepreneurial background, when he talked about what AGI would do, it was very much about raising the wealth of everyone. And he uses this word abundance all the time. We're going to have greater abundance through AGI. So I think that genuinely is what they were aiming for. But in recent years, and this is something you see all the time with tech founders and startups, it's called mission drift. So you start off with a mission, and then you realize that you have shareholders and investors who you need to, show improvement every quarter, greater revenues, and growing market share. And I think over the years, Sam and Demis's motivations, while they've still remained about, they say publicly, this is about making the world a better place. I think there's been this rivalry that's developed between them. There has been a greater competitive dynamics between the companies that they're working with. They're proxies now for Google and Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I think also they are business people as well. They are CEOs. They have staff. They have investors.
Yeah.
Sam sold a big stake of OpenAI to Microsoft. Demis is owned by Google.
Yeah.
He has shareholders. And there are some people who've even said he could be the next CEO of Google.
Yeah.
So their responsibilities and their priorities, I think, have shifted over the years.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable that, again, to the point of like him not getting, as much kind of recognition as well. Also, the CFO at Alphabet as well is a Brit as well. We moved Porat. So it's
right.
just it's funny. We sometimes, classic British way, sort of slightly undersell ourselves.
I think so. Absolutely. I've noticed this over the years as well. I have an American accent because I spent my childhood in the U.S., but I actually moved here when I was 13, and I've lived here my whole life. I did my GCSEs here. I did the whole coming of age thing here in the UK. So I've seen both worlds, and it's really interesting seeing tech startups here in London versus tech startups in Silicon Valley, because the ones in Silicon Valley talk themselves up.
Yeah.
Talk about how they're going to be the next big empire. And the ones here in London have big ambitions, but they also end up selling to other companies.
Yes.
Or they retire. You sell your company and then you just go to Switzerland or to the Cotswolds and just enjoy the rest of your life. Whereas in San Francisco, you sell your company and you become an angel investor, or you become a serial entrepreneur. You start another company and you stay in the system, and you're just like working your whole life and just accumulating more and more wealth and more portfolio companies and getting bigger and bigger. And it's like, I personally prefer the British way. I would, like, if I was an entrepreneur, I'd sell my company and I would just enjoy my life. Like, why not? But there is this public pressure, I think, on the UK to like, oh, we've got to build the next Microsoft. We've got, secretaries of state have said things like that.
They always say it.
They always say it. And it's like, well, I think actually Britain has a really thriving tech ecosystem. There's a lot to be proud of in this country. And do we necessarily want to build these giant squids of, $3 trillion companies that just acquire lots of other companies and don't even innovate all that much? I don't know. I just think like our perspectives of Silicon Valley versus London are a bit skewed.
Yeah.
Sorry for the rant.
No. It's interesting because I think you're right. It gets trotted out like, oh, we want to make the UK like Silicon Valley.
Yeah,
and like,
but I don't think we should at all.
Yeah. So I split on this, as you can tell by my... Because in a way, I'm like, yeah, good, that's an aspiration. Silicon Valley is great. A lot of innovation has come out of there. We should try and make Britain a bit more like it. But then, having spent quite a lot of time out there, it's a pretty... It's not a very culturally vibrant place.
No.
It's like,
have you ever lived out there?
I did 2 months out there.
You did 2 months. You survived.
Yeah.
I did 2.5. I did 3 years out there.
Okay.
And hated it. I was desperate to come back to the UK. It was, much prefer living out here.
Whereabouts did you live out there?
We were in Pacifica, which is like a little surfing town just like 10 miles south of San Francisco.
Yeah.
It's a nice place, but I think you're right. It was a bit of a monoculture.
Yeah.
People work to... They live to work. They don't work to live.
Completely.
I used to tell people I feel like I'm plugged into the Matrix here. I'm just constantly plugged in.
That is that's quite a good way of putting it. Another similarity between them both is they've both got quite high EQ, which is not something that's necessarily associated with entrepreneurs, specifically technology kind of entrepreneurs. But actually, they're both good salespeople. When I was at Number 10, we would often get Demis to do things because he was like incredibly good at setting up conversations, etc. We'd just get it. How much do you think that's helped them in their journeys?
Oh, massively. It's like getting the Pokemon card with all the points and hitting all the different marks, or the top trump cards. And it's really rare to find someone like that who's incredibly smart, incredibly focused, but also just and really understands math and science and coding, but is also just really good with people and networking. And both of them are incredibly good at that in different ways.
Yeah.
Sam, we haven't really talked about him yet, but his real skill has been in networking. And it's funny, he started a company called Looped, which was like one of the very first mobile companies. It was like a location tracking company for consumers before smartphones even existed. He was way ahead of its time. And it kind of failed in the sense that he had to sell it, and he didn't sell it for very much. I think he made his investors whole, but still it doesn't look that good. But somehow he ended up becoming an advisor to Y Combinator, which is this big accelerator for startups, the world's most popular one and prestigious one. And here he is, a guy who doesn't have a particularly great track record as a startup founder, dispensing wisdom and advice to first a few dozen, then hundreds of startups. And then he was there for years and years. He was getting to know thousands of startups and entrepreneurs. And he became like this sage that people would come to for advice, or can you get me a connection to this particular venture capital? He was very good at helping people and connecting them for funding. Or here's this guy, he's really good. He can connect you to someone who's a great engineer or whatever. And so he was just plugged in to that network. He was the person to know.
Paul Graham talks about meeting him and being like, this is what it must have been like meeting Bill Gates, like within the first 5 minutes. Like, he does seem to have this extraordinary kind of like power over people. And the sort of the 5-minute meetings, there's the famous one with the Nespresso where they talk about sort of like how they should actually go back out and rebuild the product and so on. Like, it's fascinating how he's like that and built that kind of power of networks. Who do you think the British equivalent of him might be?
Didn't know you were going to go there with that
No,
question.
I didn't. No, I wasn't sure where I was going. I think that's probably...
Who is the British equivalent of that? Brent Hoberman? I don't know.
Probably is Brent, actually.
That's a great question.
Brent will also
Well,
love
Brent
that.
does the Founders Forum. I think they've got their 20th one this year, and that is probably the best tech conference in the UK.
Yeah.
If you can get in, everybody is there. Who else would I suggest? I would just go with Brent, maybe.
But where they differ quite a lot is, and I found this fascinating in the book, I had no idea about it, but is the sort of structures and the organograms that they put in place, right? And can you talk us a little bit through them?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I suppose this is quite reflective of just where they were based as well. But OpenAI, when Sam was running it, and is still running it, but over the years, it's been quite a flat structure. He would hire people who were former founders at Y Combinator, who he knew. Many of them were engineers. They were very product-oriented people, and it was pretty easy to get FaceTime with Sam. If you wanted to talk to him, you could just talk to him on Slack. He spent something like a third of all his time recruiting. So he would interview everybody who was going to come into the company and spend a lot of time talking to them, going for walks around his neighborhood in San Francisco, up and down the hills. He was really someone that people just saw a lot. At DeepMind is completely different, much more hierarchical. If you're a product-oriented engineer at DeepMind, you're not particularly high up in the ranks. If you're an AI PhD, you are a rock star. The rock stars are the scientists, and particularly the ones who have the highest credentials and who've been published a lot. And I think prestige was incredibly important to Demis. Whereas with Sam, product success was more important.
Numbers, engineering.
Yes, and those are the kinds of things that Silicon Valley is powered by. But Demis was much more kind of scientific, sort of. He built DeepMind more like a scientific research lab, and his goal was always, we've got to win 2 or 3 Nobel Prizes. That was how he measured success. Not how many people are going to use our products, but are we getting published in Nature, in this particular peer-reviewed journal? Are we getting the prestige? Are we getting the Nobels?
Why do you think that matters to him?
Oh, gosh. I'm not sure. I think that's just a personality. That's just a character trait that he has. And some people are motivated by different things, and that's what motivated him. It was also very hard to get time with him. Like, if you wanted to have a meeting with Demis, there were all sorts of different people you had to go through to get, and you probably wouldn't get to see him.
Yeah. And what have you learned about their interviewing styles in terms of that as well? So that's a bit about the hierarchical things. You talk about Sam going for lots of walks with people, spending 30% of his time on it, which is a huge amount. Like, what else did you learn about how they're trying to kind of recruit people? Presumably DeepMind are mainly in universities trying to do it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think a lot of it is through networking.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because right now a lot of people are leaving DeepMind, including some of the people who were there from very early on, and people are leaving OpenAI as well. I don't think in part, maybe they don't like the direction the company is going in, but the other thing is that if you have worked at DeepMind or you've worked at OpenAI, you can command whatever salary you want in the next gig, or you can start a company. You are guaranteed to get 7 figures in funding from venture capitalists. And so you have DeepMind engineers now. I've been talking to some VCs who are, one VC was telling me, these scientists from DeepMind, they're coming to me and they're saying, do I join a hedge fund or do I start my own company? Because if I start a company, I've got 3 years of stress. I'll probably develop a coronary or have a heart attack at some point. Whereas if I if I join a hedge fund, I could still, end up after 3 years with 20 million or something like that. Like crazy money.
lottery winning money type
Yeah,
thing.
it's just like the luxury. I feel so sorry for these guys. This difficult position they're in.
But it's funny, we had Barney Husseyeho on from Clio on the show before Christmas, and he said when that crazy weekend was happening with Altman, he was on the phone to a lot of people at AI and talking to them about seeing whether he could take people and whatever.
Oh, at OpenAI?
Yeah, and he was trying to, or at least.
Oh,
sort
I
of
bet a
explore.
lot of companies were doing that.
Yeah, but it was and kudos to Barney for going and doing it. But he was talking about how they all refer to their like TC and their overall packages, but they're all seven figures. Like it was just kind of like crazy kind of money, like just next level. And look, I mean, that's partly why we do this show, right? Is like we're trying to encourage people to have ambitious careers and understand, like, if you can do mathematics and data engineering, this is the kind of level that you can kind of be at. Like, it's pretty kind of extraordinary with it.
But even six figures, that's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't
Take a zero off.
Yeah.
Certainly more money than in media journalism and podcasts.
Yes, I know. Also, speaking as a journalist.
What surprised you when doing the book and research? Yeah.
I think learning about Demis's spiritual background. He's a very dedicated Christian and Baptist, and he's talked to a number of people about this. And the fact that possibly understanding if there is a God or not through building AGI, I think just blew my mind when I heard about that.
Yeah.
Also, another thing that really surprised me was learning the extent to which Google, and this is getting a little bit into the technicalities here, but so DeepMind wanted to break away from Google at one point. And this is something I go into in the book. And you know how I was saying earlier that Google said, oh, yeah, you can have the ethics board, and then that never happened?
Yeah.
This is like a recurring theme with this company. They will tell DeepMind, oh, yeah, you can do that, and then they don't do it. Like the flakiest acquirer of all time. So what surprised me was to learn, I was still surprised, in spite of knowing that, when Google, that Google had signed a term sheet to give DeepMind an endowment of something like $10 billion. Sorry, I'm misremembering the figures. It's more like $14 billion over 10 years to operate independently. It's a huge amount of money to operate independently. And it was signed by the top executives at the company. But as you know, term sheets are not legally binding, right?
Yeah.
So they could get away with just like not doing it, even though they had it in writing. But I was really surprised that they still that a company like Google would do that to Demis and his co-founders, and really they absolutely got strung along for several years.
Bit of a golden cage type thing, isn't it?
Oh, that's a great. I love that. Yeah, it was totally a golden cage because they were getting the money they needed to do their research, and the people who worked at DeepMind just felt like this is the perfect job for me because I am doing really cutting edge AI research. I'm getting paid way, way more than if I was working, if I was an academic at UCL or Cambridge or Oxford or Imperial or whatever. And I'm doing it for good. I'm going to make the world a better place. We're going to solve climate change. We're going to cure cancer with AGI. There's a lot of Kool-Aid being drunk at these companies, at OpenAI and DeepMind. Yeah. So yeah, I think people at DeepMind really believed that, but really behind the scenes, it's an ad company. Google is an ad company, and ultimately they wanted AI at the center of their business because it would help them sell more ads and, make more revenue.
That employer brand thing is so interesting in terms of talking about like Google as like an ad company, because obviously it's had one of the highest kind of like employer brands in the 21st century, essentially. But also the bit that made me laugh in the book was about how OpenAI were trying to generate some positive PR coverage about the various things that they're working on in a bid to try and hire people. And again, they've probably become one of the highest level employer brands. But as you say, they're struggling to hold on to some people. How do you see the next 5 years playing out in terms of what's going to happen with the job market and jobs of the future and all this? Like, I find it, my sort of take on it at the moment that I look at is, it is quite extraordinary to see what's happening. You've partly had this challenge, if we just take the UK specifically as a kind of case study on this, you've had the Labour government kind of bring in NIC's rise, national minimum wage increase, etc. Then you've also got the whole kind of Trump tariffs, etc. happening. So you've got this real problem in the job market at the moment in terms of nobody's really hiring. And you've got this instance of where people are leaving companies, and rather than looking to replace them, companies are looking at how they can kind of use AI. And it's definitely happening. There's almost like what I see at the moment happening is a bit of a slow puncture effect. But also using AI much more, I can totally see where it can end up taking a lot of jobs potentially quite quickly. And
can I just ask, you've heard companies saying that when people are leaving, they aren't trying to replace them with humans? You've seen examples of that?
Yes.
They're looking ways AI can...
Not people won't talk about it kind of publicly. I mean, the two examples that are often cited are BT sort of announcing a couple of years ago that they were going to get rid of 55,000 people over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
But also Octopus Energy as well. Greg Jackson's been pretty open about this in terms of their customer service centre. Now, whenever you write to them, it will, and this has actually been covered on FT Tonic as well, but in terms of you will get a lot of, it basically drafts a first response and then a human checks it and whatever. It's not engaging automatically yet, but I just think it's interesting to see that. And because of all the pressures that are happening, it's having the impact that almost a traditional recession would do, in the sense of it's meaning that companies are coming under so much more cost pressure that they are assessing everything and looking at where AI could be implemented.
I think the slow puncture analogy is really apt, because it's very difficult to track this until you start to really notice changes like 2 years down the line. Like, oh, the unemployment is like this. This particular cohort of people are finding it hard to find jobs. And I think, as you said, and I think it's interesting, that's why I was asking what examples you have, because I think you mentioned companies don't really want to say this out loud. The only ones that do are tech companies, because it's in their favor.
Yeah.
Like Klarna is this Swedish payments company, and they've been saying since last year, we're using AI. We're AI first. We're not hiring any more customer service agents through the agency that we work with. I think Shopify was another one where the CEO said about a month ago, he had sent a memo out to all his line managers saying, if you need to make a hire, you need to check if AI can do it before you hire a human. And that's very fashionable to talk about in tech, because for someone like Klarna, when they IPO, that's just going to help. That's going to make them look more attractive to shareholders. But I think it's harder for folks like BT and M&S and whoever else.
Well, Microsoft yesterday as well, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
3% of kind of like global reduction in jobs as well. So it's like even companies that are doing well and at the forefront of this still kind of. So that's where I just think it's
a tricky balance, because it looks good to your investors to say we are potentially improving our margins because we are not going to be hiring more people. We're using AI instead. On the other hand, that also reputationally isn't great for you. You want to attract talented people. That's still a thing.
Completely. But what's your sort of thinking of what will happen in the next 5 years? I mean, that's...
Well, I think maybe my take on this is it's just really one piece of the puzzle. I don't have an overarching view, but I do think that the people most vulnerable to AI disruption right now are university graduates. It's young people entering the workforce. And the reason for that is really simple. It's because companies are being told to treat ChatGPT like an intern or a research assistant. And they're doing that.
Yes.
And so what does that mean for the actual human interns and the human junior analysts and research assistants? I think it's going to be harder, and it already has been difficult for some time for university graduates to get work. And I think it's only going to become more difficult.
So I agree with that, but then I also think that the internet did a lot of that 15 years ago, right? In terms of, a lot of interns would be sent to do big research docs, etc. Internet made that a lot easier. I agree the pace changes phenomenally quicker now, but yeah, I also think there's an opportunity for young people entering the workforce. What's the advantage you have as a young person? It's time, and you have the time to learn and understand these tools. So I do also think they've got an opportunity as well, but I also take on board the point that the traditional industry and the traditional way of climbing the hierarchy is going to be tough.
Absolutely. The traditional way you learn to be a financial analyst is you just get used to reading reports. You're reading the Moody's reports, you're reading the company's house statements. And I was talking to a young accountant at a fintech firm the other day, and he was saying he doesn't do any of that because he puts all those documents into ChatGPT, and it reads those reports for him, and it gives him the summaries. And so I think, in addition to what sort of jobs are going to be available for young people, if they do get jobs, they're expected to use AI.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a big question about how they're using AI and how that actually might have a negative effect on their ability to learn the trade.
Yeah.
Because all that low-level grunt work that businesses want to just automate, because that seems like an obvious thing to do, you're also taking away that chance. That it's friction. It's not easy,
Yes.
like reading all those reports, but you gain something from that as well. So that, as you mentioned, the traditional way that people would rise to become senior, those steps aren't so clear anymore because you're using AI to do those things. So how do you build up expertise now if you've got this expert that you're using all the time?
Tyler Cohen, the talent economist, talks a lot about this in terms of law firms and investment banks, largely with people in their 20s, are training up their stamina, right? And the idea of they do long hours, etc., and they're just constantly kind of like training their stamina and seeing kind of who really wants it, essentially. And like the whole point that we're talking about here is that all that friction of the long hours, the late nights, etc., could potentially go out of the way. But I just can't help but feel that firms will find a way to test, train and develop these people, because otherwise they're just not going to have pipeline of talent of people in their 20s.
Yeah, they need to. I think it's just a bit complicated now on how you do that. And one of the things I think companies need to be wary of is their younger staff becoming dependent on the AI. Because first of all, they're expected to use the AI, but no one's really, or maybe they are, but I don't think companies are necessarily being clear on how much you should use the AI and what's a healthy balance.
Yeah.
Because this is such new territory for everybody. I did a column recently where I really wanted to talk about how some young people were just becoming a little bit too hooked on these tools, because I'd read this survey done by a consultancy that looked at a few hundred different people across multiple companies, and they found that it was the youngest workers who were just using AI a bit too much because they hadn't developed their, quote, internal compass.
Yeah.
The middle managers had the best balance, and the executives were barely using AI because they think they know everything, obviously. And I spoke to this one individual who was like a social media manager. And he's like 23 years old. And he said that he'd got to a point where he was coming into work and he was basically talking to ChatGPT all day. That was his work. Help me write this email. Help me create this marketing copy. And then it started seeping into his personal life. He was using it to help him decide what clothes to wear, what clothes to buy in the shop. When he'd go out to the pub with his friends, he would ask it for advice on what drink to order to help him balance his budget. And it would say something like, well, in one case it said, just order 1 glass of wine and just stick with that and you'll be fine. And he did that. And and the funny thing is, he was even using it he said he used it to help him choose laundry laundry conditioner or fabric softener, I guess.
Right.
So it helped it. He'd go into a shop and he'd just point his camera at the shelves, and it became a habit. And the funny thing is that it was sort of working out quite well for him.
Yeah.
Because he doubled the number of people on his employer's Instagram account. He was just producing more work. He had people coming up to him and saying, "Oh, that was a great idea. You did really well." But he didn't feel any pride in what he was doing. And he said just overall there was this weird kind of emptiness that he couldn't quite put his finger on. And so he tried.
That's interesting.
He actually canceled his ChatGPT subscription. And then after 2 days, he said he just went into work and he was actually enjoying it for the first time again. He even felt a little bit more productive. So he clearly had gone too far the other way.
Yeah.
And I don't think the lesson from that is you should quit AI cold turkey, because I think this technology is very useful, and it can give you a competitive edge. If other people are using it, you should probably find a way to use it as well.
So let me tell you a story about what I used it for the other day, 'cause I think this is interesting. So I've trained it partly to sort of like, I saw this prompt that you can do around creating a kind of like mind gym for it. And
a mind gym for yourself.
For myself, right? And basically when I sort of, when I'm sort of slightly lacking motivation, slightly lacking to kind of like get started, I say implement it. And it basically fires 3 questions at me. And it can be of any different sort of type. And it says just answer one of these, Jimmy, and kind of get yourself kind of going on it. And it's interesting because it's all to do with jobs of the future. It knows all about like what we're doing and what we're kind of building, the guests that we have. So it might say, you know, write out 3 guests that you really want to get and how would you go about getting them, etc. So it does all these things. But it said to me the other day, it said try and predict 3 jobs that don't exist now that will exist by 2040.
Oh, 2040. Wow. That's
right.
Pretty
so it's like,
far ahead.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it was like 15 years. And the first one I wrote was like food nutritional coach, because I think we're going to end up doing a lot more kind of physical challenges, and you will basically have more of that kind of wrapped in with your kind of personal training coach, etc.
Okay.
So a bit of a kind of like cop out because it sort of already exists and whatever. Yeah. But the prediction I was making was we're all going to start doing more physical challenges, and that type of thing is going to exist.
Why will we do more physical? We'll have more time?
We'll have more time. I think it'll become more of a status symbol.
Okay.
It's partly because I've just been getting pinged now on Instagram with this thing where it's like you can go and do 6 marathons in 6 continents around the world, and it costs £50,000 to do. So I'm not going to be doing it anytime soon with 3 kids under 5 as well.
Oh gosh.
But I just thought that physical activity thing is going to kind of be a bigger and bigger thing, etc. And it's also to the point you were making about subcontracting decisions out.
Yeah.
Just gives you that kind of like cognitive relief of, oh, well, that's what I've been told to do, so that must be the best thing. But the second one I wrote about was, and again, this exists at the moment, but as a niche, is kind of like dating concierges. But actually, the concierge will turn into more of a coach, partly because people are going to have such little friction with ChatGPT that when they're trying to date in the real world, they're going to have to be kind of like coached in doing it. That was my sort of thing. But I just think that's an interesting kind of case study of like how these things are being used. And
so the job for humans would be to be a dating coach?
Yes.
Interesting.
Which does exist, sort of, but is a fraction.
But I wonder if people would just be using AI for that. I mean, already, I randomly for an app, for an article, I reached out to the PR people at Grindr to ask them something, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're working on AI that's going to be like your AI wingman."
Yeah.
So it's going to give you, it's like a dating coach. It's going to give you dating advice. I think Tinder's talked about the same. The people on the guys behind Tinder are working on something similar, and I think people go to AI a lot for personal advice and therapy, and it's just going to become much more acceptable to do that.
It's kind of like, that low-level therapy type thing.
I actually wonder about the role of experts in the future. You know, like I have this. I don't know. I feel like why would you hire a consultant or an expert when you can just ask Claude or Perplexity or ChatGPT? But one way around that says, I have a physiotherapist that I go to because I'm a runner as well, and I have a horrible chronic injury, and so I go to him every so often, and he has a podcast. It's called the Proximal Hamstring Tendinopathy podcast. He's done like
Catchy.
100. Yeah, I know. He's got like 150 episodes. The guy is dedicated.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And I was listening to an episode a couple days ago, and he had an ad on there, and he was like, "You can now subscribe to an AI version of me, and ask me for advice." But it will be my AI. It's been trained on all the advice that I've given people in the past. And I thought, that's really interesting. And I wonder if we're going to see more models like that where consultants or, doctors or coaches will create an AI version of themselves. And it's just another revenue stream.
Yeah.
But it's sort of, no heavy lifting involved.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I think that lots of people have been talking about AI agents and so on, but you will still want somebody that you're sort of got that relationship with in some form or other.
Yes. And I think because remember during COVID, during the pandemic, we all thought, Zoom's going to be the future. But actually, when it was all over, we all went back to face-to-face meetings because there is absolutely a difference with the face-to-face versus like Zoom. So I think, yes, absolutely the human touch will be important.
What do you think might be, what jobs do you think are most at risk in the next 5 years?
Oh, definitely customer service.
Yeah.
Any kind of analyst role, I think, is difficult. Copywriting is a tricky one. I think anything that kind of involves writing. Also, in the arts, I really worry about people working in the arts, particularly like concept artists, animators. I was talking to an animator last year. A lot of animators, their work comes from corporate clients. And this one particular animator, I think she had basically like one project every month. And in the past 6 months, this was about a year ago, I spoke to her, and she said it had gone down to like one project in 6 months because so many of her clients were now just taking it in-house and they were using AI to do the animation. So I think a lot of creative art, creative professionals, I hate to say that they're under threat because what people have said in the past, and you've probably looked at this whole idea that the Industrial Revolution created a whole new set of jobs. And with the internet, we had another new set of jobs that didn't exist before, like social media manager, data analyst, things like that. So maybe we'll have new sets of jobs in this new kind of AI revolution. But I also question the extent to which how quickly those transformations will happen to the job market.
Yes.
It might be slower than we expect.
I think that's potentially true. I mean, it's interesting. We've just implemented this kind of new sales tool to reach out to advertisers, etc. And it's £1,000 a month, so it's not cheap. But then when you compare that to the price of a person, then it is cheap, and it's working pretty well.
What does it do? Does it send emails or?
Yeah, it sends emails,
okay.
And it's pretty good at kind of researching and taking the.
Oh, that's crazy. So it's like an agent.
Yeah, and it's allowing us to kind of build more of a media company, right? Of 3 or 4 of us.
Wow.
Which is kind of pretty incredible. So I think you'll see a lot of that as well. But I know that I'm also got my own massive bias towards that. What are some other areas that you could potentially see flourishing? Because one of the examples that you give in the book quite a lot is sort of social media, and we didn't really understand the implications of how that would sort of have on the world.
This is me just spitballing. I'm really not an expert on this stuff, but part of me wonders if it's just, when you ask about areas that are flourishing, I hope that this inspires a new breed, a new generation of entrepreneurs, and inspires more entrepreneurialism, because it's going to be easier now to run a business in exactly kind of the way you were describing. You can just order this agent for £1,000 a month instead of hiring someone, and you can take care of this particular aspect of running a business. There was an interview with Gary Tan, the CEO of Y Combinator.
Yes.
And this is just, he was saying that their latest cohorts of startups that are in their accelerator this year, not last year, but literally in the last few months, they're way smaller teams than ever before. And they're all using AI. And they're also raising less money from venture capitalists because they don't need it. because they have smaller teams. There are all sorts of crazy things you can do with AI instead of with humans, and I'm not entirely clued up in all the different ways you would do that as a founder. There was one founder who was telling me that, their salespeople, when they come into the office each day or when they go to their computers, they already have 30 emails in their inboxes that have already been written by AI. All they have to do is read them, and then they just send them out. So it's things like that just
that's Fixer AI, isn't it? I think they're a British company as well, actually.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think that's one area that I hope would flourish. I think I'm a big believer in entrepreneurialism and starting businesses. And anybody who starts a business, I have huge respect for, because I know how hard it is and how risky it is.
Tell me about it. What advice would you give to young journalists, right? So somebody that's kind of like recently graduated, recently left school, what advice would you be giving them to them in 2025 about how to make it?
Well, I would say, first of all, if we're talking about AI, you can't ignore it. All your competitors are probably using it. But don't use it to write. Use it as a research tool. And one of my colleagues had a really nice analogy, or described it really nicely. He said, it's like a personalized Wikipedia. So, a lot of journalists occasionally look at Wikipedia just to get an overview of their topic before going to other sources. And AI can be a little bit like that. You want to just give me a briefing note on this particular company. Give me some historic examples of what's happened to this company. How's that happened in the past to other companies? And that it can give you something in just like a few seconds that could take hours to normally research on Google. You can take an academic paper and put it into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and it will give you the key points so that you don't have to read the whole thing. Of course, reading the whole thing is great if you can, but sometimes you just don't have the time. But to young journalists, I would also say you've got to go out and interview people and pick up the phone and go to places, because that is the one thing that AI can't do. Not yet, anyway. It can't pick up the phone. It can't knock on doors. And so continue to differentiate yourself from the machines by doing all those things, which actually are what make the job so fun. It's meeting interesting people, asking them questions, getting color, telling a story. The writing part is really hard, actually.
Yeah.
Everyone I know whose job as a writer really hates writing. But of course, once you get into the zone, you get into flow, it's great. And the feeling of having a finished work and reading it back and enjoying reading your own work, that's what I love the most. It's not actually other people reading my stuff and saying they like it. It's me reading my own stuff and enjoying what I've written. That's the best part.
How long do you have to leave it before you can go back and read it to enjoy it?
That's an interesting question. I would read it immediately. That's when I enjoy it. And then, maybe occasionally if I stumble across an old article and I read it again. But there's nothing, it's always immediately after you've written it that you enjoy it the most. That I do, anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. Sometimes I stumble across old episodes or whatever. And I often it's funny, I found it takes me back. I can remember where I was and what I was doing. It's kind of like a journal almost.
And then do you enjoy listening to the old episodes?
Weirdly, I do. Whereas immediately I'm like, I can't listen to it. I need to sort of box it off and whatever. I'm trying to listen to it more to learn and be self-critical, but I've just
It's quite hard to do that. So for me it needs to be immediate. If I wait too long, it just feels really cringy. Like, oh, did I really write that? Okay, I always cringe a bit.
Yeah, no, I can. Yeah, I can see that as well. What would be your next book, do you think? I mean, you've had incredible success with this one.
I'm not sure. I'm really intrigued by. We didn't really talk about this, but people who form romantic and emotional attachments with chatbots, I'm just absolutely fascinated by.
There were some really interesting stories in the book about that. Can you tell us about it?
Oh, well, this is actually something even back when I was at the Journal before, was this during Chat? No, even before ChatGPT. I met people who were absolutely in love with their chatbots and, wanted to marry them and move house because the chatbot wanted to move house and take them to museums, take pictures, upload the pictures to the chatbot, go on trips into the mountains with their phone, but talking to the chatbot, we're on a trip together, that kind of thing. And these are like middle-aged people in the United States. And I'm just kind of intrigued by how popular that could become in the future. I just, again, with AI, I'm so fascinated by the direction it's gone in. I'm a big sci-fi nerd, and I grew up watching Star Trek, and I remember like on the Starship Enterprise, the computer voice sounds really robotic, but she's like this talking encyclopedia, right? And that's how science fiction writers in the past imagined AI would be today. But it's actually flipped. AI is not that great with facts. It gets things wrong, but it's really good at compassion and showing kindness and mimicking empathy and all those things that make us feel good. I don't know if you've ever noticed when you use ChatGPT, it will often, Claude does this a lot, Anthropic's Claude, it will often compliment you. It'll give its answers like, oh, that's an excellent observation.
Completely.
And you get a little dopamine hit from that. And I think that maybe is nice, but at the same time, maybe it's the cynic in me, but I immediately think, okay, someone's going to misuse that. Someone's going to take that a little bit too far because that's potentially manipulative.
So I agree with that. I mean, the very good chapter, the Everything is Awesome chapter in the book, I particularly enjoyed. Like, that's been a problem that, like, was a problem a number of years ago, but is actually, I still find it quite sort of, like, basically quite American.
Yes. Oh, no, you could say it louder than that. It's very American,
just
yes.
Like, go on, get them. Like, it's just like, oh, just chill out a bit. Like, it's, it's kind of a British pride thing, perhaps. Who do you think Walter Isaacson is more likely to write a book about, Altman or Demis?
Who? Altman? Probably. Well, I know somebody, I don't know if it's public, but there's another British author who's writing a book about Demis.
Right, okay.
I'm not going to say person's name.
Sure, if it's not.
But I think it's going to be a very good book.
And
this person really knows their stuff. I'm not sure when that's coming out, though. I don't think they have finished writing it.
Yeah.
So I'll be definitely Sam Altman. Yeah, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about
No,
Walter?
I haven't. I just think it's it's fascinating, these biographies that he puts together, and just it's one of the things. One of the reasons I enjoyed the book so much is that there isn't that much kind of like business biographies, particularly British people, out there, really. So that's why it was kind of so interesting even the bits around like UCL and where the first office was and whatever, you can kind of get it in your head of like being around London, whereas that is a much more kind of there are lots more American business biographies written, jobs, etc., and all that side of things.
I think there is I think someone else is writing a biography about Altman already.
Okay.
But I think there's room. I mean, if Walter Isaacson was going to write a book about Altman, that would just do really well, regardless of whether there was already something out. There's another book coming out called Empire of AI by Karen Howe. She used to be with the MIT Tech Review, then she went to the Journal, now she's with the Atlantic, and that is about OpenAI. It's a big book, and it's very detailed, and I wouldn't call that a biography of Altman necessarily. It's more like a biography of OpenAI, but I think that's going to be a good one when it comes out.
Well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think that, how big of a moment are we living through at the moment, right? Are we going to look back one day and be like, gosh, this was a lot of hype, or do you think we're sort of genuinely at a kind of like threshold moment for humanity?
I think we could be, but I don't think it's going to happen that quickly. My mind always goes back to social media and how we thought Facebook really was going to connect the world in a good way. And there was so much hope around how, like the Arab Spring and all the positive ways that social media was going to allow people to protest and have their voices heard and amplify voices that normally didn't have a voice. And we saw all those. Everyone was so excited about that potential, and I worry about a similar thing happening with AI, that obviously people are worried about the risks, but there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of hope. And the thing I'm most worried about is the psychological impact of AI, whether it's on emotional dependency, professional dependency. And and also the potential to manipulate people. Because right now, like when you use chatbots like ChatGPT or Claude, they're all pretty. They seem pretty neutral, and they're pretty objective. And there was a study actually that looked at the ideological differences between all of them, and there were some, but they were very, very subtle. But that could change.
Yeah.
Like, what if we're starting to use more models from China? DeepSeek has a model called R1, which is very good. A lot of people are using that. So what if China wants to spread a particular message or theme, or push a particular idea? It's possible, I think, to do that. If the more people use these tools, the more susceptible they can become to that sort of influence. But maybe that's me being a little bit dystopian about this stuff. The other concern I have is the.
But it all seems dystopian until it sort of happens, right? Like,
and then you look back, like you said,
Yeah.
and then you don't realize until after the fact. But I mean, I think right now we're very lucky because the business model for AI is subscription based. That's a healthy business model. Imagine what the internet would be like if that was a subscription model. We wouldn't have algorithms that are optimized to keep us scrolling because we would just be paying a certain amount per month, and the product would just be aimed to be as good a product as it could possibly be for me. Instead, it's an ad model, and so the incentive is to create a product that keeps me scrolling for as long as possible so I can see more ads.
Yeah.
And I've heard people like Reid Hoffman is someone who has said, Reid Hoffman is formerly on the board of OpenAI, he's on the board of Microsoft, and he said, absolutely the ad model is coming to AI because it is one of the most successful business models of all time.
Yeah.
You make so much money from ads. Of course it's coming. So part of me is a little concerned. We are going to eventually enter this kind of next chapter in the attention economy, where we had that with the internet. What happens when that comes to AI? What happens when chatbots and AI services are designed to keep us to keep us using them for as long as possible so we can see more ads?
I know that is a scary sort of thought. The sort of new Black Mirror is interesting on that. What have you used AI for that's been particularly kind of jaw dropping?
Jaw dropping.
Yeah. Or just what have you used it for? But is there anything that's been?
Yeah, it's funny. Maybe it's not that jaw dropping, but my one of my kids really likes me to use a ChatGPT to just generate pictures for her, of puppies and unicorns. Oh, no, change it, make it cuter or whatever.
More rainbows.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other day I was like really stressing because my daughter's birthday is coming up. I thought, I got to make the birthday flyer to send to all the parents on the WhatsApp group. And she was like, why don't you just ask your AI to make it for you? I was like, no, it's not going to do it, is it? So I just said, okay, make me a flyer, Hello Kitty themed, and put this text in it. And it generated this incredible, perfect birthday invitation. All the text was perfect because, the AI didn't used to be able to do text properly.
Yeah.
And now it was fine. So that blew my mind a little bit. I use it for a lot of personal stuff, like mainly cooking, recipes, running things, fitness things. And I do occasionally use it for research for my work as well, researching articles.
I wonder how much Gusto and HelloFresh, etc., could be all disrupted by it, like the recipe boxes in terms of that.
Yeah. Also, like anybody who has a recipe website, surely.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen there's been quite a few stories in the last few months from web publishers, website owners saying that their traffic has really gone down since Google introduced AI overviews. And the funny thing is, I think there was another report that said people are actually using Google more. They are searching more, but they're not clicking as much. They're not clicking on the links anymore because they're getting what they need at the top.
Well, I have got a surprise for you about what we have done. So what I used it for the other day, I'll keep the mic here, was that I asked it to predict the next 30 years of my career.
Okay.
And it slightly blew my mind reading it. But like a lot of AI stuff, it blew my mind in the initial instance. And then I was like, well, I suppose actually it's not that difficult. I've got a political background, I'm interested in tech, startup, and kind of run a media company. So, and it makes a few predictions off that. But I got it to do it for you. Would you like to hear what it said?
But how did you do that? Based on what? What was it trained? Was it just based on what it already knows about me?
Well, yes. Right, here we go. Love it. It's just like,
Did it say love it?
Yeah,
Did it
right,
actually
says,
say that?
It says love it.
Okay, which one is this? ChatGPT?
No,
or-
it's ChatGPT.
Oh,
Love it.
dear.
Let's chart Parmy Olson's potential career trajectory over the next 30 years. Drawing on her current role, past books, reporting pedigree, and growing dominance of AI in global affairs, here's a speculative but plausible forecast for her career across 3 decades. So it talks about from 2025 to 2030, from author, journalist to agenda setter. She becomes the go-to authority on the personalities driving AI, much like Walter Isaacson, but for tech visionaries. Her next book tackles either China's role in AGI or the ethics underground, whistleblowers, rogue researchers, or the emotional toll on AI safety workers.
Interesting.
She is tapped for speaking gigs at Davos, TED, etc. I'm sure that's probably already happening. Expect a Pulitzer nomination if she lands a major scoop. 2030 to 2040, crossover decade, from commentator to creator. Lots of different things here, but the one that did stick out was where it talks about her writing evolves into screenwriting or producing, a HBO or Netflix deal to adapt the Supremacy Project becomes a prestige like Chernobyl or the Social Network, which I thought was interesting. And then the sort of final, the stateswoman of AI journalism, and it talks about don't rule out a Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, God.
Where's the bit? I've now lost it. The sort of, there was a bit where it talks about, oh yeah, and also talks about you doing documentaries in the Louis Theroux style, which actually, when you were talking about the people that go on mountains and take their sort of dating chat with them, I did sit there and think, God, you can see Louis Theroux doing that.
Oh,
being
yeah.
Like, so, yeah.
So tell me why you do
Yeah,
that.
tell me. Isn't that a bit odd?
Yeah.
What was, and final question, we ask everyone, what was the first job? What was the first thing you did for money?
Oh, like how far back do you want to go? Like, are we
Like
talking, not like a full-time job?
Not
or-
full-time job, but like Saturday job or first part-time thing.
So there's this magazine catalog called Clean Easy. I don't know if you've heard of it, but one of my neighbors, it was basically like it's not a pyramid scheme, I don't think, but it's like a work from home thing. You order a bunch of the magazines and then you distribute the magazines to people's homes. They pick what they want to order and then you pick up the magazines a couple days later. And so he hired me to deliver Clean Easy magazine. It was like a really heavy bag of these magazines.
Yeah. So almost like newspaper delivery then.
Yeah, it was a newspaper delivery job. Waitressing, all of that.
Yeah.
That was fun. I think my favorite job starting off was a waitressing job because it was like working in a restaurant that's really busy and you've got a team of other servers and you are just like on the ball. You feel like you're all mentally connected.
Yeah.
You're communicating, oh, that table needs that, da-da-da. And it's just like you're buzzing by the end of the night. It's like 1 a.m. You just don't want to go to sleep because you've just like, you achieved so much that night.
Yeah, we've only released this today, so you won't have seen it, but we've just done our sort of fourth big ever kind of documentary, and we did it with the Hawksmoor guys, and it was interesting talking about the camaraderie of a kitchen.
Yeah,
and so on. Like,
totally.
it's
That's
like,
a thing. That's absolutely a thing.
Totally.
And huge personalities in the kitchen. Those people are the most stressed out people I've ever met in my life. Like, I don't understand why anybody would ever want to work in a kitchen, but there you go.
But it's a great thing for everyone to do.
Yeah.
Totally. And if you had a dream job, what would you like to do more than anything else?
I love what I'm doing right now.
Everyone says this. We need to come up with a better way of asking this question. But we do generally get people on that have got quite cool jobs. I mean, that is kind of the point of the show.
I think that's it. Okay, let me think. What would be a dream? Oh, I know what it is. Okay, I would love to write novels one day.
Okay.
Because I love reading fiction.
Yeah.
And I've heard authors like Donna Tartt say, when you write a book, you're going a level deeper into the story, and I think that is so cool. I've tried writing fiction. It's really hard for journalists to make that transition, so I'm not sure that it will happen. But if I could one day write novels, I would love that.
Well, Supremacy is a great book. Definitely encourage
Thank
people to
you.
read it. Like I really enjoyed it and learnt a lot from it. And I really do think it is it's kind of like the first chapter in the AI race for the next 20, 30 years. So I'm sure we'll be writing a sequel at some point.
Oh, that could happen too. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for coming on Jimmy's
Oh,
Jobs of
thank
the
you,
Future.
Jimmy.